In the unforgiving wild, where the line between life and death is no thicker than a breath, an American photographer happened upon a lion cub being swept away by a raging river. He risked everything to save it. What he didn't know was that this single act of courage would spark a bond that defied nature itself. A silent gratitude, returned not in words, but by an entire pride of lions. Ethan Brooks sat quietly beneath the shade of an old camel thorn tree, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of black coffee. The first light of day pierced through the thin mist hanging over the Okavango Delta, turning the air into a golden haze, like someone had sprinkled glitter across the wet grass. In the distance, the calls of migratory birds echoed from the shimmering surface of the water. Behind the tall reeds, a few impalas grazed slowly, ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound. Ethan let out a long sigh, his emerald blue eyes narrowing under the morning light. But deep within them lay a haze of unnamed sorrow. 3 years ago, he'd left Virginia behind. The noise of the city, the scars from classified Navy missions, and a marriage too shattered to fix, he walked away from it all. Botswana wasn't his first choice, but it was the only place where he felt he could truly disappear, not in a dark way. He wanted to vanish from things that no longer mattered: noise, pressure, pain. Here, he worked for an eco-tour company that brought American tourists to explore the wild beauty of the Okavango. By day, he was a guide. By night, a camp guard. And in the in-between moments, he wandered with his old Nikon D6, searching for pieces of himself in the burnt red sunsets or the wild gaze of a leopard. Ethan didn't talk much, but folks at the research station called him silent as stone, sharp as an eagle's eye. Maybe because he once saved a tourist from a spitting cobra. Or maybe because he could sit for hours watching a lion pride without taking a single photo. He didn't need others to understand. All he needed was a moment. That one moment when, as he once told Maya, the young biologist from Minnesota, you look into the eyes of a wild animal, and it doesn't flinch, doesn't run, it just looks back, like your soul's being seen. That morning, Ethan woke earlier than usual. Something had tugged at him all night, like a whisper calling from the far edge of the delta. He packed his gear: camera, long lens, a water flask, and 2 protein bars. Maya had just woken up, her hair a tangled mess, brushing her teeth with a bottle of water, when she spotted him quietly heading toward the northern bank. "Where are you off to this early?" she called, still half asleep. "Big tracks near the reeds. Might be a leopard or a lion," Ethan said without turning back. "You're not going alone, are you?" "Just scouting." "If I'm not back in 2 hours, call me on the radio." Maya pouted, but she knew better than to argue. Ethan was the kind of man who followed his gut, and his gut rarely lied. He slipped through the sparse woods, his steps light on the ground. The early breeze carried the scent of wet soil and fresh grass. The low, steady hum in the distance signaled mosquitoes gathering near stagnant pools. As he neared the bank, where the ground grew soft and animal tracks etched the mud, Ethan crouched down. There it was, a lion cub's track, no mistaking it. Small pads, close step spacing, young. No more than 5 months, he guessed. He frowned. Lion cubs never walk alone, unless... A faint cry echoed from the riverbed, like a kitten being torn from its mother. Then a splash, violent, urgent. Ethan bolted toward the sound. There, caught in the swirling current left behind by last night's storm, something tiny flailed helplessly, A lion cub, being swept away. Without a second thought, Ethan dropped his camera, shrugged off his jacket, and dove in. The water was freezing, clutching at him like cold hands trying to drag him down. The flood had twisted the river's flow. Beneath the surface could be roots, rocks, even crocodiles. But he didn't think about any of that. He saw only those wide, tear-filled eyes, the trembling ears, and the cracked, desperate cries. He swam fast, arms slicing through the current. As he reached the cub, he stretched out his hand. It panicked, scratching his chest. But then, as if it understood, it clung to his shoulder with tiny claws. Ethan wrapped his arm around its shivering body, turned, and began kicking upstream, toward the nearest bank. A sudden blow. Something, maybe a log, slammed into his shoulder. The pain made his vision blur. He clenched his teeth, lifting the cub's head above water, and pushed forward. Every kick burned. Every breath felt like a blade. But he didn't stop. Finally, when the water reached his chest, Ethan gasped for air. He was exhausted. His arms were numb. His heart was pounding. He turned to pull the cub onto dry ground and froze. Right in front of him, standing in the soaked reeds, was a lion pride. 4 lionesses, 1 dominant male, all perfectly still. No growl, no movement, just eyes, 6 golden pairs locked onto him, and the cub in his arms. Ethan didn't move. His grip tightened around the cub. His breath came short and shallow. This could be it. If they attacked, he didn't stand a chance. No gun, no knife, no time. He looked down at the tiny creature, still trembling, still whimpering. No doubt now, this was one of theirs. "Guess you belong to them," he whispered. "Hope. They know I was only trying to help." One lioness, larger than the rest, with a faded scar across her left cheek, stepped forward. Ethan swallowed hard. The wind had stopped. The air went still. The sun, now risen, cast a soft light that made the droplets on her coat shimmer like gold dust. Ethan closed his eyes. Then, something no one would ever believe happened. The lioness didn't attack. She stopped just short of him, then slowly bowed her head, a deliberate nod, gentle, reverent, like some ancient ritual. Then she leaned forward and gave him a single lick on the forehead, soft, just enough to feel her breath, not enough to hurt. Ethan opened his eyes, stunned. Was he being thanked? Behind her, the rest of the pride began to move, not with aggression, not with threat, but with welcome. The cub whimpered quietly, gazing toward the pride. And Ethan, standing in muddy waters, soaked to the bone, felt something crack wide open in his chest. A feeling he couldn't name, but knew he'd touched something beyond instinct, beyond logic. It was the beginning of something that would change his life forever. Each step Ethan took felt like lifting bricks from the mud. His soaked boots clung to the ground, his body nearly drained of strength. But he held on, steadying himself as he gently laid the lion cub down at the edge of the dry grass. Its little legs folded under its body, breath coming in broken gasps, ears still trembling and caked with mud and water. Its breathing was weak, but in its eyes, the fear slowly gave way to something else. Peace. As if it understood the arms that pulled it from death's grip were not a threat, but a rescue. In front of them, the pride remained still, forming a loose semicircle around the 2 that had just returned from the torrent. No growls, no threats. The wind whispered through the reeds, carrying the scent of wild grass, wet earth. And something else Ethan couldn't quite name, maybe reverence. He dared not move too quickly. Instinct told him that every motion now had weight. Every glance, every shift, every breath spoke volumes to the creatures watching him. But another part of him, deeper, quieter, unshakable, told him he was safe. The lioness stepped forward again, this time closer, just an arm's length away. Ethan slowly sat down, palms open and facing up. A silent gesture. I came here to take nothing. The cub raised its head and let out a small cry, a sound that was half a whimper, half a call for its mother. The lioness lowered her nose to the cub's back. Then, ever so softly, she let out a chuff, a short, rounded sound, warm and gentle. Biologists call it a lion's whisper, a sign of affection. The cub leaned forward, pressing its head into her chest, letting out a purr like a house cat. Ethan didn't move. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest as he witnessed what felt like a sacred reunion. Then, from the radio on his hip, Maya's voice cracked through the stillness. "Ethan, do you read me?" "Where are you?" He flinched, startled, then reached slowly to press the button and whispered, "I'm okay. Don't come closer. There's a pride, but everything's calm." "Oh my God," Maya breathed through the radio. "I can see everything from the drone." "Ethan, did you just risk your life to save a lion cub?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked up and met the eyes of the pride's alpha male, massive, regal, rain-soaked black mane framing a face like carved bronze, his gaze glowing like fire. The lion didn't move toward him, didn't leave either. He lay down, chin resting on his front paws, eyes fixed on Ethan. Not defensive, not guarded. It was watchful, protective, almost. Maya's voice returned, this time sharper. "Ethan, say something. The drone's almost out of battery. I see a huge male. I'm alerting the station." "No," Ethan cut in. "Don't. No one interferes. I can't just watch if you're in danger." "I'm not in danger." "Not now." Silence on the other end. After a moment, Maya exhaled. "I don't know what I'm watching, but from up here, it looks like a ritual." Ethan allowed himself a small smile. That's how it feels. The wind stilled. The air thickened. Not with fear, but with a presence. A feeling that something was happening far beyond the bounds of human understanding. The lioness leaned in again, this time pressing her forehead gently to Ethan's. Not a lick, not a threat, just a touch, a greeting, like lions do when they reunite after a long night's hunt. Ethan barely breathed. He could feel her breath, not foul, as people often say, but warm, earthy, the scent of grass and soil, of survival. Then she stepped back, tail swaying softly. She turned to her pride. One by one, the lions backed away. Their eyes stayed on Ethan, not with suspicion, but recognition. The cub wobbled to its feet, looked up at Ethan, then turned and ran toward its mother. Still shaking, it nuzzled against her leg, and she began licking its face, checking every inch, making sure her baby was whole again. Ethan stayed still, watching. The pride paused one last time in the middle of the reeds. The alpha lifted his head high, then turned slowly. One by one, they disappeared into the tall grass, like a dream fading into the midday sun. Ethan stood, legs unsteady. His body was soaked. Mud covered his arms, and his left shoulder throbbed from the impact in the water. But none of that mattered. Nothing mattered, except what had just happened. He turned to look back at the river, the place where he'd dived in to save a tiny, fragile life. And now, as he stood there, he realized it was his life that had just been saved. Maya came running minutes later, her face pale, hair loose and wild from wind and sweat. "God, Ethan, I thought you... I can't believe..." "We just witnessed something books can't explain," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's not in the textbooks, not in the data." Maya stared at him, then burst into tears. "You risked everything." Ethan shook his head gently. "I didn't have a choice. When you see something that small, helpless, floating in the current, you don't see a lion. You see life, a soul, something that tells you have to move." He bent down, picking up his jacket from the grass. It was soaked through with river water and mud. Maya was quiet for a moment, then said softly, I got all of it on video." Ethan paused. "The drone recorded everything, from the moment you jumped in to when the lioness licked your forehead. I think the world needs to see this." He looked at her, eyes calm and clear. "Not yet. Let's wait until we understand what we've seen." Far above them, a flock of white storks flew across the sky. Their shadows danced across the water like letters from the wild. Ethan closed his eyes, inhaled deeply. The scent of earth and grass filled his lungs, and in that moment he knew life would never be the same again. Somewhere out in that vast delta, golden eyes remembered the man who dared swim against the current for one fragile life. Night wind rustled through the mopan trees, creaking like whispers from the heart of the delta. Inside a canvas tent, pitched near the forest's edge, Ethan lay motionless, eyes wide open, staring at the ash-gray ceiling. Outside, insects sang their eternal song, nature's soundtrack that never fades. Not far off, somewhere in the shadows, was the place where his life had just shifted course, where a trembling lion cub had clung to his muddy arms, and where a pride of lions had borne witness to his act not with threat, but with something that felt like acknowledgement. In Ethan's chest, his heart still hadn't found its rhythm, not from fear, from something else, something he didn't yet know how to name. It was a feeling tangled somewhere between confusion, awe, emotion, and something near sacred, not spiritual, not superstition, just that rare feeling a person might know once in their life, the moment they become a small part of something far greater than themselves. The tent flap opened. Maya stepped in, holding a cup of water and a bag of ice. "Your shoulder's bruised," she said softly. "You should press this on it." Ethan sat up, peeled off his damp shirt, revealing a long bruise that stretched from his left shoulder down his ribs. Maya said nothing. She simply sat beside him, wrapped the ice in a cloth, and gently pressed it against the purple swelling. They sat there in silence, just the wind whispering through the brush and the soft hush of the forest. "When you didn't answer the radio," Maya finally said, "I thought I'd lost you." Ethan stared out toward the dim lights of the station, his voice lower than usual. "So did I. But you still jumped in. There was no choice. It was reflex." Maya held the ice a little tighter. That reflex saved a life. And maybe it changed how humans see lions. Ethan didn't respond. He knew she was right. Not everyone would believe the story, but Maya had proof. The drone footage. Clear enough to catch every moment. The lioness's bow, the forehead touch, the emotion in each step. "We'll have to report this to the research station," Maya went on, "and send the video to Dr. Charlotte Mendez. She'll know how to analyze it and verify the behavior." Still, Ethan said nothing, partly from exhaustion, but mostly because something inside him remained tangled. He looked at Maya, his voice gentle. "Maya, do you believe in intuition?" "Absolutely," she nodded. "Especially when working with animals." "Then, mine tells me this isn't over. Those lions, they didn't just come for the cub. They knew me. They knew what I'd done. And they let me live." "They didn't just let you live," Maya said with a soft smile. "They bowed to you, Ethan." He didn't reply, but deep down he accepted it. The pride had seen him as one of their own. The next morning, Ethan woke before the sky had fully turned blue. He stepped outside with no jacket, no combed hair, just himself, bare and whole, facing a land that had embraced him in ways he never expected. Maya was by the generator hut, going through drone footage. She waved him over. "You need to see this." On the small laptop screen, the video replayed the moment Ethan stepped out of the water, lions emerging like phantoms from the mist, standing there like stone guardians. The camera caught every stare, every chuff, every tender lick. But one detail made Ethan freeze. At the very end, just as the pride turned to leave, the alpha male paused, looked back at Ethan, and nodded. It wasn't a trick of light. It wasn't imagined. It was real, a slow, grounded nod. Deep with meaning. Maya turned to him, eyes wide with fire. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Ethan swallowed. "I saw it. They understand. Maybe." "No, Ethan. They understand." They locked eyes. No more words needed. After a quick breakfast, Ethan decided to return to the riverbank. Not out of recklessness, but to retrace the steps, to see the places where the lions had stood, where the cub had lain, where he'd nearly drowned. Maya went with him, drone floating quietly above them like a silent eye in the sky. When they arrived, nothing had changed. The ground still held paw prints. Grass still bore the marks of trampling. But one thing stood out. Nestled among the reeds where the pride had disappeared was a patch of grass, flattened, as if something large had rested there through the night. Ethan crouched, touched the ground. It was still warm. "They came back," he whispered. Maya held her breath. "Maybe. No. This wasn't random. They were here last night." Close. He stood scanning the trees, half expecting to see familiar golden eyes watching from afar. No one. Only the breeze and the first gold light spilling across the reeds. Ethan turned to Maya, and in his eyes was something new. Not the man scarred by war, not the man chasing sunsets with a camera, but a man reborn in the eyes of the wild. "I'm staying," he said. "What do you mean?" "I'm staying here. If they want to find me again, I'll be here. I won't disappear." She didn't respond, but stood beside him, in silence, both watching the shifting sunlight over the field where lions once stood. From the south, the cry of a hawk pierced the sky. A cloud drifted past, and beneath their feet, unseen footsteps still lingered, like threads tying Ethan to something miraculous. In the place where the black water nearly claimed him, he had found something few people ever do. Recognition, not in words, but in soul. The evening light settled gently across the Okavango, like a spill of warm honey. The sun drifted westward, painting the tall reeds in hues of deep red and gold. Ethan sat atop the hood of an old Land Cruiser, camera resting in his lap, his eyes fixed on a clearing where floodwaters had recently receded. The wind carried the scent of scorched grass and wet earth. Maya sat inside the vehicle, eyes glued to her tablet connected to the drone. They'd been here over 3 hours, waiting, watching, saying little. "No sign from the north sector," Maya whispered, eyes scanning coordinates. "Looks like the pride's moved further out." Ethan didn't answer. He closed one eye, adjusting focus through the lens. Far out on the edge of the clearing, a herd of wildebeest grazed with nerves drawn tight. One lifted its head, nostrils flaring, and let out a low snort. That was a signal. Something was moving in the brush to the east. Ethan lowered the camera and stood, shading his eyes. A patch of tall grass shifted, not from wind. There was no roar, no crash, just a subtle ripple. And then he saw it. First the ears. Then the small, familiar figure, low to the ground, graceful. The lion cub, no longer muddy and trembling like the day before. Its coat was dry now, golden in the light, like honey under sun. It walked slowly, hesitantly, then stopped at the edge of the clearing, golden eyes fixed on Ethan. Ethan exhaled, slowly, as though the whole world had paused for a heartbeat. He didn't move, afraid he'd scare it off. But the cub didn't run. It simply stared, long, intently, then let out a small chuff. A soft sound, a greeting, a signal. From the reeds behind it, a lioness emerged, the one with the faint scar on her left cheek. Then came 2 more lionesses, and finally, the alpha male. Maya whispered, "Oh my God." The pride stood there, not hidden, not lurking, just watching. The air grew thick, not with fear, but with something sacred. Ethan stepped down from the hood, arms relaxed at his sides. No weapon, no camera. "You're out of your mind," Maya muttered. "What are you doing?" "Nothing," Ethan said, eyes never leaving the pride. "I just want them to see me." He walked a few steps into the open, no more than 20 meters from the lions. The lioness rose, quietly. No growl. Then she stepped forward. 3 meters. 2. Ethan stopped. His heart pounded like a drum, but his gaze remained calm, like still water before the wind. The lioness stopped just an arm's reach away. Her breath hung heavy in the air, warm and damp like morning fog. Ethan looked into her eyes, for the second time in his life, and finally understood what he'd only guessed before. This wasn't instinct, it was memory. They remembered him. The lioness didn't bow this time. Instead, she began to circle him, slowly, deliberately, as if studying him anew. The cub followed, sniffing at Ethan's boots, playful, until its mother nudged it gently aside. When the circle was complete, the lioness stood still in front of him and stared deep. Then, as if part of some unspoken ceremony, she lifted her head and pressed it gently against his chest. No one said a word. No one took a photo. There were no cheers. Just a wild lioness, majestic, proud, offering recognition to a man from another world. Ethan didn't flinch. He raised a hand slowly and placed it on her head, warm beneath his palm. The lioness didn't react. She simply breathed. When she pulled away, the cub rubbed against his leg one last time, then turned to follow her. The pride moved off into the reeds. No rush, no panic. Like visitors finishing a visit, with every intention of returning. Maya walked up beside him, eyes wide, mouth half open, then closed again. You touched her, she said, voice shaking. She greeted you. Not the first time, Ethan replied. I've never seen anything like this, not in any field journal, not in any behavioral database. Wild lions don't do this, ever. Ethan turned to her, eyes brighter than she'd ever seen. Well, now they do. They both looked toward the tree line where the lions had disappeared. The sky was changing, orange, then pink, then deep violet. Cicadas began calling from the brush. Another day was ending, and something new had begun. Maya sat down in the grass, tablet forgotten beside her. Ethan, what is it? We could prove it, that wild animals feel emotion, not just our projections, real emotion. And maybe, Ethan added, start rethinking how we treat them. They needed no more words. A single glance was enough. Night fell across the delta, and somewhere in the tall grass, a few golden eyes still watched, not to hunt, but to make sure. The man was still there, still true to his word, still a part of their world. The night sky over Botswana stretched like a velvet cloth, studded with diamonds. The Milky Way curled across the heavens, its reflection glimmering in the puddles left behind by the rainy season, making the entire delta seem as if it were breathing light. Ethan sat alone beside a small fire outside the station, a mug of thick black coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the darkness where the reeds stretched all the way to the horizon. Since the second encounter with the lions, his mind hadn't rested. It wasn't fear. He'd left that behind the day he stepped out of the floodwaters. It was something else. He knew now there was something reaching out to him, beyond instinct, beyond wilderness, a presence, wordless, unexplainable, but whole and real. Maya stepped out of the tent, a light khaki jacket draped over her shoulders. In her hands was a printed document. Ethan, I just emailed Dr. Mendez. Full footage, detailed report. I also printed a copy for you. Want to check it before we send it off? Ethan took the pages and glanced through a few sections. Maya's writing was clear, scientific, neutral, no embellishment, no dramatics. It's good, he nodded. She'll understand. What if they recognize the lion's reaction as a new behavior? I think... Ethan paused, sipped his coffee, then continued. We're not discovering something new. We're finally seeing something that's always been there. It's just that no one dared believe animals could remember, could feel, could forgive, and even be grateful. Maya sat beside him. The fire popped and crackled. The smell of burning wood mixed with the damp grass and earth, raw and real, just like this land. Ever been hurt by an animal? She asked. Ethan chuckled softly. A baboon once stole my sandwich. Does that count? No. Then, no. But I've been hurt by people. She hesitated. Your ex-wife. Did she leave because you were too deep into this wild world? He didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire, watching the embers glow. No. She left because I wasn't the same man after the Middle East. I don't blame her. When the wounds inside never stop bleeding, the person next to you eventually runs out of strength. And nature saved you? Ethan gave a small nod. Not because it healed me, but because it never asked me to be anything. Silence stretched between them. Crickets chirped. An owl glided overhead. The forest breathed around them. "Do you think there'll be another encounter?" Maya asked, eyes still on the distant shadows. "There will be." "How can you be sure?" "Because I haven't fulfilled what I was brought here to do. I don't believe in blind fate, but I do believe every encounter has its reason. I didn't save that cub just to save it. I did it because I needed to remember who I was." The next morning, Ethan woke before dawn. The air carried a scent he recognized immediately. The scent of presence, not the stench of a predator. Something subtler. Something that raised goosebumps, not out of fear, but recognition. He stepped out of the tent. The reeds to the west were parted slightly, as if something, or someone, had passed through. There was no sound. But he knew. The lions had returned. Maya was still asleep. Ethan didn't wake her. He quietly made his way back to the open clearing where the pride had appeared before. The breeze was soft, the early sun pale. A flock of spur-winged geese took off from the water, their wings echoing like the overture to a meeting long fated. When he reached the clearing, he stopped. The cub was there, alone. It didn't flinch, didn't run. It looked at him, then slowly padded forward. Ethan knelt, palms open, just like before. The cub came close, stopped only a few feet away. It pressed its head into his hand, rubbing gently like a kitten. Ethan felt the small heartbeat under that warm skin and soft fur. Its golden eyes gazed up at him, bright and still. Then, from behind the reeds, the lioness appeared. No surprise, no threat, just presence. Then the others followed, 2 lionesses and the black-maned male. This time they didn't form a circle. They formed 2 lines, like a path, an aisle of honor. Ethan stood. He said nothing, but every part of him understood something words couldn't hold. He was being invited in, not into territory, but into a family, something the human world calls belonging. But lions spoke it through eyes and gesture. He walked slowly between them, his footsteps soft in the damp earth. No one growled. No one moved. It was unspoken agreement. When he reached the end, the lioness stepped forward again, touched her forehead to his, longer this time, deeper, a ritual, an acknowledgement, something no human on earth had ever received from a wild pride. Ethan returned to the station in silence. Maya was already waiting at the door, eyes wide with confusion. "Where did you go?" "To see them again." "Was it different this time?" He looked at her, calm and steady. "This time, I wasn't an outsider." It rained just before dawn. A fine mist fell like whispered breath, soft and steady, blurring everything it touched. The tall reeds in front of the research station gleamed as though waxed, and the roof of Ethan's tent dripped in slow, metronomic taps, like a water clock counting time. Ethan woke early. He didn't know exactly when he'd fallen asleep. He only remembered sitting alone by the fire long after the lions had escorted him across the field. He had stared into the darkness where they'd disappeared, the fire long dead, and yet something still burned inside his chest. Not fear, not pride, something quieter. Stillness. A silence so complete, it was the very thing he used to dream of after every war zone he'd returned from, but never truly found. Until now, Maya was already up. She sat in the research tent, eyes glued to her computer screen, typing steadily. "You didn't sleep?" Ethan stood at the door, hot coffee in hand. "No. I'm compiling the report for the International Wildlife Conservation Institute. Footage from the drone yesterday, too." Ethan walked over and glanced at the screen. From above, the footage was clear. The lions moving in two perfect lines, forming a narrow path that led directly to where Ethan stood. Every movement was deliberate. It wasn't random. It was ritual. "You sure you want to send this out?" Ethan asked, voice low. "I don't want this turning into some spectacle." "No, Ethan," Maya said, turning to him. "This isn't for attention. It's so the world knows. We're not above animals. We're beside them." Some boundaries get crossed, not through dominance, but through trust. Ethan said nothing. He knew she was right, but a quiet doubt lingered in his chest. Did humanity deserve that trust? That afternoon, the rain cleared. The ground was still damp, the air softer. Ethan and Maya returned to the open field where they'd seen the lions. No new tracks, but something strange caught their eyes. In the middle of the clearing, a small branch lay deliberately placed, resting perfectly across two flat stones. Maya frowned. "That wasn't here yesterday." Ethan walked over, knelt beside it. It was a dry acacia limb, placed intentionally, not scattered, not fallen. "They left it?" Maya asked. "Maybe," Ethan replied, gaze distant. "Or the wind. But if it was the wind, why right here?" Maya didn't answer. She looked at him, puzzled. "Have you ever thought, maybe that pride isn't just a group of animals? Maybe they're a presence?" Ethan smiled gently. "I once saw a man survive a hail of bullets and fall apart eating dinner with his family. I don't find anything strange anymore." They left at sunset, taking the branch with them. A silent symbol, a message not meant to be explained. That night, back at the research station, a video call was set up between Maya, Ethan, and Dr. Charlotte Mendez, a behavioral expert from Stanford University. Charlotte was a sharp-eyed, silver-haired woman with a voice like carved stone. "So you're telling me," she began, "that a wild lion pride performed an acceptance ritual with a human?" Maya pulled up the drone footage, played it. No narration, just the images. Charlotte watched in silence. When the video ended, she spoke slowly. "That's not documented in any record, but I won't rush a conclusion. Ethan, you were the only one to make close contact?" "Yes." "Did you use any attractant, food, scent lures, prior training?" "No. I just pulled one of their cubs out of a flood." "That's it?" "That's it." Charlotte nodded, her face unreadable. "Then we may be witnessing something so rare, it could rewrite how we teach wild animal behavior. Chuffing, non-threatening approach, formation, greeting rituals. These are all signs of social cognition, but across species, this would be a first." Ethan leaned back in his chair and let out a breath. He hadn't asked for recognition, but it mattered somehow that someone else finally felt what he had. Days later, the news began to spread. A reporter from National Geographic arrived, then a crew from the BBC. Ethan refused interviews, but Maya spoke for him, calmly, clearly. She explained the data, the footage, the behavioral patterns. No fantasy, no exaggeration. Social media began calling him The man who was accepted. Clips went viral. Some people wept. Others doubted, claimed it was staged. Ethan didn't care. He didn't need their belief. He already had what mattered. A bond no explanation could contain. One early morning, while resetting camera gear, Ethan noticed Maya frozen near the station door. She pointed toward the field. The lions had returned. This time, they didn't wait at a distance. They came all the way to the edge of the tent. No rush, no fear. As if they belonged. The lioness led. The cub ran ahead, playful, like a puppy, rubbing against Ethan's legs before darting back beneath its mother's belly. Ethan knelt slowly. No sudden moves. He didn't reach out. He simply placed his left hand over his chest and bowed his head. The lioness stepped forward and bowed too. Once again. This time, longer. Maya stood behind him, camera in hand. But she didn't press record. She knew. Some moments aren't meant to be captured. They're meant to be lived. The lions lingered a few minutes more, then turned and left. No roar, no heavy tracks, just presence, and a thank you that needed no sound. Ethan watched them go, felt something tighten gently in his chest, like someone had placed a warm hand on his heart, something close to sacred. That night, he wrote in his journal, "I didn't save them. They saved me, from the part of my life where I'd stopped believing in anyone." The name spread like wildfire through the dry bush. Simba's brother. At first, it appeared in short blog posts by independent conservationists, then in lengthy essays in Smithsonian and National Geographic. Within 3 weeks of his third encounter with the pride, Ethan Brooks, the quiet man who lived deep in the Okavango Delta, had become a name spoken everywhere, from zoology symposiums to elementary classrooms in Oregon. Not because he was the first to save a lion cub, but because of what happened after. A wild lion pride's response caught on camera for the first time. A ritual-like display of social acceptance. A recognition across species. Ethan had no social media, no YouTube channel. No interest in applause or seeing his face pasted on magazine covers. But that didn't stop the tide. Tourists, filmmakers, students, scholars, they all began arriving at the research station where Maya and Ethan worked. Their questions poured out. What did it feel like when the lioness licked your forehead? Did you use any pheromones? Do you think lions can form memory the way humans do? Most of the time, Ethan just smiled. He gave short answers, or none at all. His silence only deepened the mystery, and made people believe that behind his eyes was something far deeper than science could measure. Maya, on the other hand, became the voice of truth. She stood in for him, coordinating interviews, sharing facts, and most importantly, protecting the lions from becoming a spectacle. One day, a major documentary crew from New York arrived. They offered to fund the research station for 2 years in exchange for exclusive filming rights of Ethan and the pride. He declined. "Why?" the young producer asked, clearly baffled. Ethan answered slowly. "Because the most precious things aren't what you capture, but what you must be present to feel." That evening, Maya came to his tent. She sat in the low wooden chair beside him. "Today you turned down 3 journalists and a professor from South Africa," she said. "Are you done talking to people?" Ethan poured her a cup of warm rooibos tea. "It's not that I don't want to speak," he said. "I just don't want to speak for the sake of curiosity. I want to speak when I truly understand what it is I'm telling." "And do you understand it yet?" He looked at her, his eyes calm and steady. Not yet, but I'm learning. Every time I see them, I learn a little more about myself. They sat in that strange, quiet harmony. Maya understood Ethan in a way few ever could. She'd once thought he was cold, but now she saw it for what it was: armor. And beneath it, a soul slowly stitching itself back together through wild eyes and silent gestures. A week later, the lions came again. This time, they weren't far off. At dawn, while Ethan was adjusting his camera lenses, a familiar chuff echoed from the western brush. He looked up. The cub, now bigger, stronger, full of life, stepped from the grass and walked straight toward him. Ethan stood. No rush, no fear. They met like old friends. The cub pressed its head against Ethan's leg, then flopped onto the ground like a big puppy waiting for affection. Ethan crouched, laid a hand on its head, stroking gently. The skin was warm, the fur coarse but clean. The golden eyes looked up at him, completely unafraid. Maya came running, phone in hand. "You know," she said, still breathless, "people are calling you Simba's brother." Ethan laughed, for the first time in months. "I think I'm the one learning from him, not the other way around." But what happened next stunned even Maya. The entire pride, all 6 lions, stepped out from behind the cub. None growled. None looked guarded. They walked forward and stood in a line, just a few meters from Ethan. The lioness stepped ahead, bowed her head for the 3rd time, and then, for the first time, the alpha male, who had always kept his distance, began walking forward. Each step shook the ground. Ethan didn't move. The lion didn't crouch, didn't snarl, didn't lift his chin in challenge. He stopped in front of Ethan, stretched his neck forward, and touched his head to Ethan's shoulder. An act never before recorded between a wild male lion and any creature outside its pride. Ethan reached up and touched the spot on his shoulder where it had happened. "We're friends," he whispered. Maya stood frozen behind him, eyes brimming, unable to record. "It's okay," Ethan said, turning to her, as if reading her mind. This is meant to be remembered with the heart. From that day on, Ethan's presence in the lion's territory was no longer a surprise. It was simply accepted. The cub, now nicknamed Asani by Maya, meaning strong in Swana, began visiting near camp almost every afternoon. It didn't beg. It didn't demand. It simply lay in the shade nearby. Present, just like Ethan. Locals and visitors alike began calling Ethan by a new name: Ngwana Yatao, child of the lion. And Ethan, the man once broken by war, who once lived like a ghost, now walked among the wild, not as a visitor, but as one of their own. July swept in with dry winds from the Kalahari. The reeds rustled beneath the sun, and the cracked earth split into fine, bird-footed lines. The Okavango Delta was shifting seasons. Water was retreating, revealing mud-streaked shallows, and the footprints left behind by silent migrations in the night. Ethan sat at the rough wooden table in the research tent, pencil dulled at the tip. In front of him, a map of the area, pages covered in scribbled notes, sketches, timestamps. Maya sat across from him, laptop open, the drone control interface glowing on the screen, alongside a cluster of biological sensor points placed across a 3-kilometer radius. For the past 3 weeks, they had begun formalizing what had once felt like a string of miracles. Dr. Charlotte Mendez, now an official part of the team, had sent over 3 acoustic sensors, 5 infrared cameras, and an array of tools to measure nonverbal lion behavior. It was no longer just a remarkable story. It was now a study, an exploration of what the academic world had begun calling advanced interspecies social response. Ethan studied the map, brow furrowed. "We've had 5 clear encounters," he said. 3 within 5 meters. No signs of threat behavior. But it's still not enough to confirm recognition response versus simple familiarity. Maya nodded, flipping through her notebook. "The last time, Asani came alone, just before dawn. He stayed under the tree for more than 2 hours. Even when you stepped out, he didn't move. That's a choice-based response," Ethan said quietly. "We need to log it as a marker." She typed quickly. "Logged." "And the lioness?" Ethan asked, eyes flicking to the data chart. Maya pointed to the screen. "She's always the first to arrive. First to make contact. Only one to perform the bow. 3 instances across 32 days. Each time, stable posture, no aggression, no ear twitches, no leg retraction. And the alpha male? Only 1 physical contact, but twice he stayed within 2 meters of you. No warning growls. Last time included a shoulder touch." Ethan nodded, then looked toward the tent opening. The afternoon light cast his silhouette across the floor, a still man in a world that never stopped moving. "We have a recognition pattern," he said quietly. "But we're still missing something." Maya raised an eyebrow. Missing what?" "Emotion. The machines can't read emotion. We can't measure feelings, Ethan. Not with machines, but with presence." She didn't reply, because she knew. He was right. The following week, Charlotte Mendez arrived in person. She was a woman of logic, yet her eyes sparkled like a child, seeing something for the first time. When she met Ethan, she said little, just shook his hand and asked, "Are you ready for the world to step into your story?" Ethan studied her. "As long as the world doesn't try to turn it into a myth." Charlotte shook Maya's hand, then walked straight toward the field where the lions usually appeared. "I want to meet them," she said firmly. "Not today," Ethan said, shaking his head. "Why not?" "Because today, they didn't call me." Charlotte went silent, not out of disagreement, but because, for the first time in her life, she was learning how to listen with a sense only known to those who've stood before wild creatures, unarmed and unrecorded. The next evening, Ethan returned to the clearing. He carried nothing, no radio, no camera, just a slim stick and a small acacia branch. He knelt, drew a circle in the dirt, then placed the branch in its center. Charlotte and Maya watched from a distance. "What's he doing?" Charlotte whispered. Maya murmured, "It's his way of saying, 'I'm here. If you want to come, I'll wait.'" Nothing happened that day, but the next morning, when Ethan came back, the circle was still there, and in the middle, a single paw print, large, fresh, clear. Charlotte crouched, took measurements, photos. But what struck her wasn't the size or direction of the print. It was where it was, dead center, as if answering the invitation. In the days that followed, they installed sensors around the circle's edge. They set non-pheromone scent lures, non-invasive, designed to test whether the pride would respond specifically to Ethan's scent. The results stunned them. 2 of the 5 lionesses approached and lay near the scent sample from Ethan. No reaction at all to other human samples. Charlotte concluded, "This is no longer familiarity. This is individual recognition." But Ethan remained cautious. "We're nearing a line," he said, eyes distant, "between understanding and interfering." Maya nodded. "And where do you want to stop?" right at the place where I no longer need tests to know they trust me. One evening, as the sun dropped low and the breeze carried the sweet scent of ripening grass, Asani appeared again, alone. Ethan was already waiting in the field. No gear, no plans. Asani walked up, lay down beside him, not like a lion, but like a friend. Ethan stroked his head, eyes closing gently. "You're teaching me, aren't you?" he whispered. "Teaching me how to be, without needing to prove." From a distance, Charlotte turned to Maya and softly said, "Now I understand. It's what science can't measure, but the heart knows with certainty." The dry season sky over the Okavango stretched so wide, it felt like it had no end. The earth cracked open beneath the desert sun, and red dust clung to pant legs, to the tires of the Land Cruiser, and to the corners of the human heart. Ethan sat in the cab of the old Toyota, his sun-bleached canvas hat shielding his eyes from the sharp light piercing through the sparse acacia branches. One hand on the wheel, his gaze fixed on the stretch of land ahead, the place he quietly called the Nameless Zone. Beside him, Maya flipped through her field journal. It had been over 2 months since Asani last visited the camp. No paw prints, no soft chuffs in the reeds, not a single strand of lion's fur left in the soil. Still, Ethan came every day, said little, expected nothing. He just came. A gentle reminder. "I'm still here, if you need me." Charlotte had returned to California, leaving Maya and the support team to handle remote data coordination. The research project now bore a formal title: Interspecies Social Bonds and Emotional Memory in Panthera leo leo, an academic name for something Ethan simply called unspoken kinship. "Do you think he's gone for good?" Maya asked, her voice straddling somewhere between hope and sorrow. Ethan shook his head slowly. "Not gone, just busy living." The way he said it made Maya smile. Something about the way he spoke always made things feel lighter, even when they brushed up against the deepest parts of loneliness and loss. The truck stopped at the edge of a dry lowland, where Ethan once drew a circle and left an acacia branch. There was nothing left now but cracked soil and the brittle remnants of last season's grass. They sat in silence, listening to the rustle of the wind and the cries of dust birds overhead. Suddenly, a movement, subtle, distant, but Ethan caught it. He raised the binoculars, and time tugged him backward, back to those early, trembling days. A small figure moved across the open land, head slightly tilted, a slow, loping gait, tail flicking gently. It was Asani, now taller, broader, with shoulders built like his father's, but the eyes, they were the same. And the way he looked at Ethan, like an invisible thread, had never stopped pulling their spirits together. Ethan didn't rush. He opened the truck door and climbed onto the hood, just like he used to. Asani padded forward, unhurried, unfazed, eyes locked on the man waiting for him. Maya reached for her camera, but Ethan raised a hand, softly. Let him come without being watched. Asani stopped in front of the truck, lifted his head, inhaled gently. Then he sat. Didn't lie down, didn't inch forward. Just was. Ethan spoke, like greeting an old friend. "I knew you'd come back. Thank you." The lion closed his eyes, tilted his head slightly to the left, and released a short, warm chuff. Ethan chuckled, tapping his knee. "Still know me, huh?" Maya whispered. "This can't be explained by traditional models." Ethan didn't answer. He stepped down and slowly walked toward Asani. At 3 steps away, he stopped and sat. Asani rose and approached, each stride pressing down on a trail of memory. He stretched his neck forward and touched his forehead to Ethan's. Once more, longer, heavier, filled with meaning. Ethan touched his own forehead. He could still feel the warmth of that breath. And they sat like that. A man, a lion. No barrier between instinct and emotion. No predator. No prey. Just 2 beings who had met each other in the quiet depths of trust. Asani lay down beside him, back against the earth, tail gently flicking, as if nestled among his pride. Ethan remained still, eyes closed. "You didn't come back to be cared for," he whispered. "You came back to remind me that someone still remembers I exist." They stayed there for over an hour. Maya didn't record. She stood at a distance, sometimes scribbling notes, but mostly she just watched, offering her full heart to the moment. On the drive back, Ethan spoke. This one was different. "How?" Maya asked. "He didn't just come to say hello." "Then what did he come for?" "To make sure I'm okay." 3 days later, Asani returned. This time, at dawn. And he wasn't alone. The lioness came behind him. Further back, 2 other females followed. They didn't approach the station. They didn't damage a thing. They lay at the edge of the grassland, close enough to be seen, far enough to remain undisturbed. A kind of visit. For the first time in her 30-plus years of wildlife research, Maya wrote in her journal, "I believe I'm witnessing a form of visitation between souls that simply wear different shapes." Each day, Ethan came to sit in the clearing. No calls, no whistles, no bait. Each day, Asani, or one from the pride, would appear. Under the hard sun, under the shade of an old acacia, they sat beside each other, like companions who had walked through a season of life and found their way back by nothing but heartbeat. One quiet evening, Ethan turned to Maya and said, "If I'm not here someday, tell them I saw myself through their eyes." Maya replied, without pause, "They already know, Ethan. They've known for a long time." The first winds of September carried with them the raw scent of freshly damp earth. The dry season hadn't fully let go, but the sky had lowered, softened, like even the Okavango Delta was growing weary. Ethan sat beneath the marula tree behind the camp, his eyes still as a lake at dawn. In his hand was a small, weathered notebook, its pages frayed at the edges, and the front ones stained with water. Maya approached from behind, placing a steaming cup of tea beside him. "Writing again?" Ethan nodded. "Not really writing, just recording the things I don't want to forget." "You afraid you'll forget?" "Not afraid I'll forget. Afraid no one will believe they ever happened." Maya said nothing. She knew. Sometimes a man like Ethan, a man who had survived war, battled depression, and stood silently in communion with wild beasts, sometimes all he needed was someone willing to sit and listen. Lately, though, something had shifted. Not in Ethan, but in the lions. Asani hadn't shown up for 3 days, the first time since his return. No paw prints, no chuff in the tall grass. Nothing. Ethan still came every afternoon, sitting in the clearing like always. But instead of soft greetings or a familiar head tilt, all he heard were insects buzzing and the sun cracking on his shoulders. On the 4th day, one of the lionesses appeared, Alone, thinner. Her gait was tentative, and she wouldn't meet Ethan's eyes. She stopped 10 steps away, sat, but didn't lie down, didn't come closer. After 10 minutes, she left, no gesture, no message. Ethan returned to camp, heavy. "Something's not right," he told Maya. "You think Asani's hurt?" "Could be, or worse, separated, or hunted." The lions in that region had always coexisted peacefully with people. But the water was running low this season. Cattle from the nearby villages had begun to push up against the reserve's borders. Conflict could spark easily. Ethan knew all it took was a single lion attacking a cow, and no one would need another reason to set a trap. The next day, Ethan made the call. He left the station with Maya and a young local named Jabo, a quiet, sharp-eyed tracker who knew every blade of grass within 10 kilometers. They packed drones, binoculars, a tracking rig, and a frequency scanner linked to a collar placed months ago on one of the lionesses. The search lasted over 8 hours, under a scorching sky. Ethan said little. His eyes moved constantly, sweeping leaves, prints, trails, shadows. By late afternoon, Jabo pulled the vehicle to a stop. "Smell that, fresh meat." They stepped out. The wind carried a sharp metallic tang. Fresh blood. Maya drew her field knife, following Jabo closely. Ethan came last, eyes still scanning. Then they found it. A large antelope carcass, torn open, still wet, but no lions, no drag marks, no sign of feeding. Like it had been killed and left. Ethan crouched, touching the soil. His eyes narrowed. Tire tracks, heavy tread, fresh. "Hunting vehicle?" Maya asked, voice shaking. "Could be." Jabo scanned the horizon. "No patrols use this path. Locals don't drive trucks like that." They followed the tire marks. They led to a thicket near the southern boundary of the reserve. There, hidden beneath the brush, a steel snare, blood still fresh on its jaws. "Dear God," Maya gasped. Ethan knelt, fists clenched. "This isn't village work. This is pro gear. Poachers." Jabo grimaced. "I've seen this setup. Rich hunters pay locals to set the traps. They move the catch across the border." Ethan rose, his voice heavier than it had been in years. "If they've got Asani, we have to find him." That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat outside the tent, eyes locked on the forest line, like he was waiting for a sign, a whisper from the other side of the trees. Before dawn, Maya came out, handing him a mug of coffee. "You should rest." Ethan shook his head. "I've been asleep for 10 years, Maya. I'm awake now." She said nothing, just sat beside him, silent. Then, a sound from the western trees, not loud, not long, but familiar, a low, short roar. Ethan sprang to his feet. "It's him!" He ran into the forest, shadows still thick under the breaking sky. Maya and Jabo followed. Through tangled acacias and cold underbrush, they reached a clearing, and there, bathed in the soft blue of pre-dawn light, stood Asani, his back leg wounded, dried blood crusted at his side. But he was upright, head held high, eyes fixed on Ethan, like defying death itself. Ethan dropped to his knees. "I'm here. It's okay now." Asani stepped forward, each move leaving a trace of red. Maya choked up. "He made it," Jabo whispered. "Or he chose to come back." instead of dying alone. Ethan didn't reach for him. He waited. Let the lion choose. And Asani, understanding somehow, lay down beside him, rested his head on Ethan's lap, like he used to in the very beginning. They sat there in the forest, no one speaking. Only the breath of a creature that had survived. And the man who had once traded his soul for a chance to believe again. The early morning sun hadn't yet broken through the acacia canopy when the research camp stirred with a quiet urgency. No one said much, but every movement felt quicker, more deliberate, as if something important was hanging in the air, unseen but heavy. Asani was being treated in a semi-open pen, once used for injured antelopes. Of course, no one ever imagined a day would come when a wild lion would choose to return to this place. Not to be cared for, but to remind the very man who once saved him. That trust can find its way back. Ethan sat just outside, a cup of hot coffee cooling in his hands, untouched. His eyes were fixed on the enclosure, as if afraid that even a blink might make Asani vanish back into the bush, like a dream he never meant to wake from. Maya stepped out, holding a scan of the internal injury. No broken bones, she said. But the muscle's torn. He'll need at least 2 weeks of rest. He? Ethan tilted his head, smiling. Maya looked sheepish. I mean, it. Ethan didn't answer right away. Finally, he murmured, No. He is right. No lion ever acted more like kin. A soft chuff echoed from inside the pen. Neither of them spoke. They just sat, listening to the rhythm of a story they barely understood, yet somehow had become a part of. Word of Asani's injury spread fast through the research world. Dr. Charlotte Mendez messaged them urgently. Don't do anything reckless. Any interaction must remain within ethical limits. Don't let emotion override protocol. Ethan didn't reply, not out of disrespect, but because he knew, better than anyone else, there are moments when logic is not the guide you should follow. 3 days later, a team from the International Fauna Link, IFL, arrived by helicopter. 2 wildlife vets, a behavioral psychologist, and a documentary photographer. Ethan wasn't thrilled. He knew why they'd come. The story had leaked. The lion that returned to its rescuer. A bond that defies primal instinct. Their first meeting was tense. Dr. Lena Hart, a predator behavior specialist, stated plainly, "We need to document every interaction between Asani and the humans. We'll extract the data to model cross-species memory linkage." Ethan asked, "And what about emotion? How do you plan to measure that?" Lena frowned. "We use facial expression metrics." "What about loyalty? Or the willingness to face danger just to come back? What do your metrics say about that?" Silence. Ethan stood up and walked out. That evening, Asani lay resting in the pen. Ethan sat beside him. No fence, no gloves, no tranquilizers. Just a notebook and an old pencil worn down to the nub. "Some folks want to turn you into a data point," he whispered. "But me, I just want to know why you came back." Asani didn't move, but his eyes never left Ethan's. And those eyes, they weren't the eyes of a predator. They were the eyes of something lost, something that had fallen deep and chosen to climb back, something that had decided to return. "Did you ever feel like you didn't belong?" Ethan asked, voice tight. "Like I did. Standing in a crowded city, where no one even knows your name? Asani gave a soft chuff. Yeah, Ethan nodded. I get it. 2 days later, everything shifted. One of the adult lionesses, Ethan had nicknamed her Willow for the graceful way she walked, appeared near the camp. But she wasn't alone. She brought 2 cubs, no more than 6 months old. It had never happened before. Maya filmed the moment and nearly cried. They're bringing the next generation. But why? Ethan didn't hesitate. To introduce them, like family bringing the kids to meet their uncle. The whole team fell silent. Asani stood. His wounds had begun to close, his gait still uneven, but his presence unmistakably strong. He stepped outside, facing Willow and the cubs. No growls, no tension. One of the cubs walked toward Ethan, sniffed the air around him, and in that instant, he knew. The boundary had disappeared. It was no longer man and beast. It was just us. The following week, IFL requested to relocate Asani to a central conservation facility for advanced observation. Ethan refused, firmly. He came here on his own. He'll leave the same way. Lena pressed him, but he only said one thing. If you really want to understand them, you have to learn how not to possess. Later, he handed Maya a paper. Read it. It was his resignation letter from the research project. Short and final. When theory begins to dim the light of emotion, I no longer belong as a documenter. Let someone else measure. I will live this story, with skin and heart and breath. Maya didn't sign it. She just looked at him and said, I won't let you walk this alone. That night, Ethan wandered to the forest's edge, where Willow and the cubs rested. He sat a short distance away, watching the darkness weave between leaves. A low growl rumbled from somewhere deep. Not Asani. The pride male. Ethan smiled. You're still watching. Like a father giving the silent nod when his kid brings a friend home. He lay back on the ground, arms folded behind his head. Above him, thousands of stars. Beneath him, earth still warm from the day. But within him, for the first time in a long, long time, peace. No more wondering why the lions hadn't attacked him. Only the certainty of why he had become one of them. By December, the Okavango skies wore a golden haze from scorched grass. The wind drifted in from the south, dry, whispering with the scent of sun-cracked wood and fallen leaves. Ethan sat on the front step of his wooden cabin, eyes scanning the field where the lions used to appear each morning, when dew still clung to the acacia trees. Each passing day felt more fragile, like things were slowly closing. Asani had made a full recovery. After 6 weeks near the station, he began to withdraw deeper into the wild. Not hiding, just following instinct. The instinct of a hunter, a future leader. Willow and the cubs stopped coming too. At first, Ethan felt the ache of absence, but over time, he understood. They weren't abandoning him. They were ending a chapter. The right way. That evening, Ethan walked alone to the water's edge, the same place where he'd first seen Asani again after months apart. The wind came stronger than usual. The water, muddy and still, mirrored the sky like a dull glass. He placed a small brown cloth on the ground, a shirt he'd worn the day he leapt into the river to save a lion cub, frayed, torn, steeped in the smell of time. And still faintly stained where that tiny paw had once clung for life. Ethan folded the shirt gently, laid it on a flat stone, not as a farewell, but as a promise. Left behind, right where it all began. Maya stepped up behind him, silent. "You sure?" she asked, eyes fixed on the fabric. Ethan nodded. "I think it's time. We've walked far enough together. The rest, he's got to take on his own." She sat beside him. The wind danced through her hair, carrying the scent of wildflowers and dry earth. "Do you think we'll see them again?" she whispered. Ethan smiled. "You don't have to see someone again to know they're still out there." A few weeks later, Ethan returned to California. For the first time in years, he left the Delta behind. Maya stayed, overseeing the project. Dr. Charlotte Mendez wrote a 40-page report detailing the Ethan Asani case as a rare example of emotional linkage between man and wild animal. It stirred the scientific world. Even earned a keynote invitation to the International Conference on Animal Behavior in Oslo. But Ethan didn't attend. He stayed home. A wooden cabin on the edge of the sequoia forest. Each morning, he brewed coffee, opened his photojournal, read over old notes, and sometimes, in the hush between wind and pine needles, he'd hear it. A chuff, faint and wild, echoing inside his chest, slowing his heart for just one beat. Then, one day, everything changed. One February morning, Maya sent a short video from Botswana. The security camera had captured a full-grown male lion, broad-shouldered, streaks of grey in his mane, walking straight to the edge of the camp. Not Asani, but with the same eyes. The lion stopped at the very stone where Ethan had left the old shirt. It sat down. No roar, no retreat. Then it lowered its head, touching the rock, right where Ethan once sat. Maya's message came with the video. Maybe not a hello. Maybe just a thank you. Ethan printed the image and hung it on his wall, just below another. A photo of him and young Asani, their eyes meeting through the fence of a half-open enclosure. That spring, Ethan began writing a book, not a scientific text, but a story. A tale of a lion cub swept away in a cold river, and the lonely man who pulled him from the current. No chapters, no graphs, no behavioral models, just a quiet truth. If a lion can remember kindness, then never doubt the heart of any living thing. A year later, Ethan returned to the Okavango. Not to study, not to film, just to sit beneath the acacia tree, where he had once waited each dusk for Asani. And there, once again, beneath the golden hush of evening sun, a lion appeared on the horizon, no longer a cub needing rescue, but a full-grown creature, strong, bright-eyed, regal. Yet when he drew near, he still moved with that slow, familiar grace, and let out that same soft chuff. Ethan laughed quietly. "You still know your way home, huh?" Asani said nothing. Of course not. But the way he sat beside Ethan, the way he looked at him, it was enough. Man and lion, side by side, until the sun slipped fully below the grasslands, leaving behind the last light of day, like a whisper from nature itself. Between instinct and gratitude, there's a place where no words are needed, so long as your heart still dares to believe. If you've made it this far, chances are this story touched your heart, just like it touched ours while bringing it to life. Do you believe animals can feel gratitude toward humans? If yes, type 1 in the comments. If you're still thinking about it, just type 0. Even a single digit tells us you're still here with the story. And if you'd like to keep walking with us, to witness more moments where nature and the human spirit meet, don't forget to subscribe. Because the next story just might stir your heart even more. We are the storytellers. But you're the reason these stories live on.